At the United Nations condemnation of that gas attack in Syria, but not even a vote on the condemnation. Tonight, all talk, no action, and a warning of war from the United States. I'm Brent, Goff in Berlin. This is The Day.
The Syrian Arab Republic categorically denies using any poisonous gases in Khan Sheikhoun or in any other city or village.
This bears all the hallmarks of the Assad regime, and the use of chemical weapons is a war crime. But until Russia changes its ways, this Security Council will remain blocked. That is the sad reality that the world has got used to.
We are already used to absolutely unfounded accusations against Damascus. We are used to Syria bashing. There is only one desire behind it: to remove the legal Syrian government from power, whatever it takes.
I will now add this. When the United Nations consistently fails in its duty to act collectively, there are times in the life of states that we are compelled to take our own action.
These are very troubled times in the Middle East, and we see what happened just recently, yesterday in Syria. Horrible, horrible thing, unspeakable. It is a terrible affront to humanity, I can tell you, terrible. You'll see.
Well, welcome to the program, everyone. We begin the day with the question, will it be different this time around? Just as we have seen in the past, tonight Syrian civilians are reporting unspeakable horrors from an attack that has all the hallmarks of chemical weapons. And again, world leaders are condemning the attack. President Bashar al-Assad's regime and his Russian allies again denying any involvement. The UN Security Council today met in an emergency session, and a resolution condemning the Assad regime for the attack was proposed, and that was it. The status quo of protests plagued by paralysis. Well, on the ground in Syria, Doctors Without Borders say that the patients that they treated had the symptoms of nerve gas poisoning. The death toll stands at about 100. More than 200 are being treated. Well, our program begins tonight with the stories of two Syrian civilians who yesterday watched their world and their families die before their very eyes. You'll hear the voice of Fadel, a 25-year-old schoolteacher who describes in English what she woke up to yesterday morning. But first, the voice of Abdelhamid al-Youssef. You'll see him cradling his 9-month-old twins who perished in the attack. The report begins with Abdel urging his cousin to take the camera and record what is happening. It is those horrifying images that Abdel has asked us to show the world.
Film them. Film them. Aya and Ahmed. Say goodbye, my loves. Say goodbye.
أنا كنت جنبهم.
I was right beside them.
شلتهم هني وأمهم.
I took them outside with their mother.
وأسعفتهم لبرا.
They were
كانوا
conscious.
واعيين. بعد 10 دقائق شمينا الريحة.
But 10 minutes later, we could smell the gas.
بعد العالم
And my
يسعفون.
children couldn't handle it anymore.
وأنا رحت أسقف لأهلي. أهلي ياسر أخوي استشهد.
My brother Yasser is dead. I couldn't save him. So was my brother Abdel Karim. My nephew Yasser Mohammed, I couldn't save. Hammer, my nephew, I couldn't save. Shaima, my niece, I couldn't save. My sister-in-law, they all died.
We were sleeping early in the morning, and at about maybe 6:30, I think so, we heard a very loud noise. All windows and doors were opened. I took my son and left the house with my husband. In the way, a big lorry stopped us and told us that they had many dead people. We immediately left the car and ran towards the lorry. And we saw our relatives. All were my relatives, my friends, my neighbors. I can't believe it. My God. Children, please listen to me. Please save us. We are the victims of this injustice war. Please don't be silent anymore. Please stop it. Please save those scared children. Your silence kills us. Move, change, do anything to save Syrians. Enough is enough. Enough is enough.
Well, tonight, there is no action by the international community to report. The U.S. today, in that emergency session of the UN Security Council, sent out a clear warning that no action in the UN would force the U.S. possibly to take action alone. Here's more of what was said in the UN, beginning with the U.S. Ambassador, Nikki Haley.
Yesterday morning, we awoke to pictures, to children foaming at the mouth, suffering convulsions, being carried in the arms of desperate parents. We saw rows of lifeless bodies, some still in diapers, some with visible scars of a chemical weapons attack.
Syria also reaffirms that the Syrian Arab Army does not have any form or type of chemical weapons. We never have used them and we never will. The turning point was the establishment by the previous US administration of the so-called red lines. Crossing those red lines was supposed to lead to military intervention in the Syrian conflict. That decision served as a starting point for future provocations by terrorists and extremist structures with the use of chemical weapons.
Well, from the UN in New York to the U.S. Capitol, Washington, D.C., I'm joined now by Emma Asher from the conservative Cato Institute. Emma has written extensively on U.S. foreign policy, including the policies, or lack thereof, of the Trump administration. Emma, welcome to the show. Did we hear today from Nikki Haley at the UN a declaration of intent by the U.S. to declare war on Assad?
Well, that's what's so interesting, because in recent days before this attack happened, we actually saw the Trump administration, people like Rex Tillerson, come out and say that the U.S. wasn't going to insist that Assad go, that they weren't going to focus on Assad. They effectively changed the policy from what the Obama administration had been pursuing. But today we had these very strong statements from Nikki Haley. We later in the afternoon had fairly strong statements from President Trump. And so the policy of the Trump administration seems to be extremely confused on this issue, and I'm not sure anyone really knows what they're going to do.
There was a resolution condemning Syria for the gas attack at the UN, but, I mean, it wasn't even voted on by the Council. This will only confirm Trump's accusations that the UN is nothing but a talking shop.
Well, you know, he's wrong that the UN is completely useless, but in terms of condemning attacks like this, where one Security Council member, in this case Russia, has vested interests in the side of one of the parties, the UN is never a good place to achieve any particularly strong solutions.
I'd like for you to take a listen to what Trump said today about the gas attack.
And I will tell you that attack on children yesterday had a big impact on me. Big impact. That was a horrible, horrible thing. And I've been watching it and seeing it, and it doesn't get any worse than that. And I have that flexibility, and it's very, very possible. And I will tell you, it's already happened, that my attitude toward Syria and Assad has changed very much.
Okay, the president there, moved by the horrors of yesterday, but what's he saying?
Well, I think it's hard not to be moved by some of the images that we've seen over the last couple of days. But the point that that we need to come back to is that there's no obvious policy solution here. So we're talking about whether the US will take action on this issue, but it's not clear what that action would be. The last time this came up in 2013, the Obama administration considered targeted strikes on the Assad regime to discourage them from using chemical weapons, but even then they weren't considering regime change particularly. And that policy itself changed over the years, and Trump during the campaign explicitly said that he would focus on ISIS and not on the Assad regime. So in terms of practical policy solutions, it's not clear that he's going to actually change his policy.
Yeah, you wrote just a couple of weeks ago that Trump's foreign policy approach during the campaign can be, and I'm quoting you here, can be charitably described as incoherent. Does that apply today when it comes to Syria? I mean, if we go beyond fighting ISIS in Syria, is there anything that we can really grab onto in terms of a policy?
Trump's policies during the campaign were incoherent. That's really the only way to describe them. He would often contradict himself. Even in the same day, he would make a speech and contradict himself later on the same topic. So we really don't have any idea how he's going to react on a bunch of big issues. And this is pretty terrifying in foreign policy, right? We should have some idea what the US president thinks on key issues. But when we're talking about today's debates about Syria, I think it's important to remember that there are different groups inside the Trump administration all trying to convince the president that their approach is right. And that includes fairly status quo, hawkish Republicans, people like his Vice President Mike Pence. They include some of the retired military men like General Mattis, who may have a slightly different view, looking at how impractical an intervention in Syria would be. And then there's the people like Steve Bannon, who may not be as supportive of intervention at all. So there's all these different voices debating what's going to happen next.
Well, what about the voice of Steve Bannon? He was removed today from the National Security Council. Is that a correction of a mistake that we're seeing by the president?
It's really hard to tell. And I think, frankly, it's too soon to say whether this is actually an indication that Steve Bannon's influence in the White House is declining. It's entirely possible that they have the Trump administration has reverted to this more formal, traditional form of the National Security Council, but that Steve Bannon will continue to be a large player in foreign policy decisions. He just won't be attending these meetings. So we really don't know what this decision means. And I think over the next couple of weeks, that will start to become clearer.
Some officials in the White House said that with this change today, the National Security Council is back to its core function. But I'm wondering, what does that mean about Trump's son-in-law, Jared Kushner? I mean, he is the one that Trump has been presenting to the world when it comes to talking foreign policy.
Yes, and there's a point to make about Bannon, which is with Jared Kushner, he never had that seat on the NSC. Trump's executive order didn't give him one, yet Kushner has been very influential in foreign policy. So it's not necessarily that formal institutions are the most important thing here. In terms of normalizing the NSC, or what the administration described as de-operationalizing the NSC, they're basically portraying this as trying to correct some of the excesses of the Obama administration, where the NSC sort of ballooned in size and it became very difficult to manage, where the NSC was getting involved in a lot of debates that frankly should have been carried out at the State Department.
But that wasn't what Steve Bannon was put there for, right? I mean, we were told today by the White House that Steve Bannon had been put there to oversee what Michael Flynn, the former National Security Advisor, was doing. And Flynn left, about 2 months ago, and now Bannon has been taken out. So does that make sense to you?
Well, so this comes back to, do we trust anything that this White House tells us? So you're right. That is the reason that the White House gave, was that even during the campaign and in the transition, they were worried about Mike Flynn, so they put Bannon on the council to act as a counterweight to him. That story is not particularly plausible when you consider the fact that Trump went ahead and named Mike Flynn to be his national security advisor, and Flynn was only eventually forced out over allegations related to Russia. So I think we should take that story with a real grain of salt.
Today in the New York Times, Tom Friedman writes that the gas attack in Syria is teaching Trump a lesson about real world problems beyond those easy campaign promises. I mean, Syria, we know, is much more than just ISIS. There's Assad there's Iran, there's Turkey, Al-Qaeda. Are Trump's advisors, do you think, are they getting all of this into the president's head?
Again, difficult to say, but given the way that he responds when reporters ask him off-the-cuff questions, it does seem that Trump has basically no understanding of the nuances of foreign policy. And this is a big problem because he also isn't surrounded by a lot of people that really know what they're talking about. We're starting to see more professionals come into the National Security Council, but that's a slow process. The State Department and Defense Department have people at the very top, but not all of the appointments at the middle levels have even been made yet. So Trump is not getting a lot of good information and advice on foreign policy issues, and given his own complete lack of understanding of these issues, he's probably just making snap decisions.
Yeah, well, we'll have to see where that leads us now after this gas attack in Syria. Emma Ashford with the Cato Institute in Washington. Emma, thank you very much. We appreciate your insights.
Thanks.